Let us pray. Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, we give you glory and honor. You are the Lord of Lords, and you are the King of Kings. Jehovah Ebenezer, the Lord who has brought us this far. Father, we commit this conference into your hands right from today until we end on Wednesday. We pray for your presence with us. We pray that you may guide us. We pray for oneness, for unity. We pray that everyone will be safe in this place, and even the food that we will eat, we pray that it will just help everyone to be satisfied and that no one will fall sick after eating. We pray for this whole place. We pray for everyone, even those who are still on their way coming here. We pray for them. We pray for every presenter, everyone who will participate. We pray that you may be with them. We pray for your covering over each and every one of us. We give you glory and honor. You are Lord of Lords and King of Kings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Shingi. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 62nd National Safety and Health at Work Conference, the SHORE Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor and enthusiasm that we welcome you to this conference, a pivotal gathering where innovation meets responsibility and foresight that shapes the future of work. This year's theme, I think, brings it all home as we venture into the new future that we have. And our theme this year is Occupational Safety and Health Technology and Future of Work. And this conference invites us to explore transformative power in technology, in safeguarding the workers, enhancing productivity, and refining our workplace standards across all industry in Zimbabwe. And we are happy that this time we have it going beyond Zimbabwe, as we have friends who are joining us from the region, as you will find as we progress with the conference. As Zimbabwe navigates this evolving landscape of digitization, automation, and artificial intelligence, it is imperative that our commitment to worker safety remains steadfast and adaptive. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 days which is packed, and as you scan through our program, you'll find that today we have 3 segments, starting this morning with talks around emerging technologies in safety and health. And we have 3 presentations in this particular round. And we would want to welcome our colleague all the way from Brussels, who's going to be sharing how they are doing safety and health in the EU. After lunch, we are going to have a session, which is a panel discussion related to one of the things that we are struggling with as a country, an area of concern. This is occupational safety and health and social security for the artisanal miners. There is a growing population who is involved in this artisanal mining, and we hope that we'll be able to explore what is happening there and innovations for us to keep the workers in this particular sector safe. In the afternoon, we are going to have parallel sessions, and I hope in your registration you were able to choose the parallel sessions that you are interested in in joining. In the evening, courtesy of our organizers, we are going to have a welcome dinner, something to relax over, where we can interact more and we get to know each other. Tomorrow is another action-packed day, where in the morning we are going to start by exploring issues of artificial intelligence and machine learning and its implication on occupational safety and health. This will go on to the mid-morning session, where we are excited to discuss with you over the legislative provisions that are happening within the legislative processes that are happening in our country as we work towards our new occupational safety and health, as well as international instruments, especially concentrating on our new convention on biological hazards. In the afternoon, we'll continue with our parallel sessions, which then takes us to the third day. Where in the morning, we are going to have issues related to occupational health, where we have biological hazards as well as balancing workplace issues, productivity and wellness. Artificial intelligence will also come in as we explore issues of silica dust exposure. This will then lead us to our official opening session, where we are going to talk more about how we can leverage on artificial intelligence in the workplace, and then our official opening. Paradoxically, we are having our official opening as our final segment within the conference, as we want to accommodate our minister, who's going to be coming in, as he has other competing commitments, which had failed us to have him joining us from the word go. But he's hard with us, and we should be able to have him on Wednesday. Wednesday is as tradition. We are going to end up with our awards dinner, and I hope we're all excited and ready for that. But as we go into the conference itself, we hope it will be as interactive as possible. We are going to get ideas from you as to how we can then move on with keeping our citizenry safe. You'll find that they say sitting is the new smoking. Have we heard that saying? So we want to keep you moving through this conference, and by its location, I think we have to do a bit of walking as we go for our lunch in the hotel, but we have also given step counters. Please record your step counts for each day of the conference. Keep moving as much as possible, as we would want to encourage that activity, and we have you moving. And there's going to be a competition on the biggest mover. There are prizes to be won on the number of steps that you are going to be counting throughout the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I will invite Dr. Mutetwa to come as the session chair for our first segment, and I wish you fruitful and very good deliberations through the 3 days. I welcome you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Betty, for introducing us to the program. Indeed, a packed 3-day program, highly interactive, and indeed the Show Conference 2025 have just begun. Without much ado, allow me to introduce the first speaker, setting the tone for the Safety and Health at Work Conference 2025. And this is Charles Chishire. Charles Chishire is a disaster risk and emergence manager with a broad-based expertise in the area of disaster risk and emergence services, safety, health, and environmental management, livestock production. As you can see, he is also an animal specialist, a well-qualified animal scientist with a bachelor's degree in advanced animal health, as well as an author. He has authored a chapter in a recently published handbook on disaster response. So you can see that we have got a well-grounded expert in the area of disaster management, including issues to do with safety and health. Now, Charles, as you come up, as we give him a round of applause, he's going to take us through a very emerging and very important aspect which deals with the line of sight on critical operations, the use of the risk runner, technology to manage critical controls to as simple as reasonably practicable. Ladies and gentlemen, as we put our hands together, allow me to invite Charles Chishiri to take us through the first presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman of this plenary. As stated, I'm Charles Chishiri. I'm working for Tonga Gillette, retired she manager. Now basically looking after, the assets, the properties for Tonga Gillette. My topic for today basically talks to a technology called Risk Runner, which is actually an API-based application, for dynamic risk management. As you can see, I'm donning a bow tie. It's not by accident. It's actually because we will be discussing bow ties. For those who are responsible for, catastrophic risk management in organizations, you will be aware that, your bow tie risk management application is one of those tools for any risk manager that they will have in their toolbox. I'm also wearing pink. It's also because it's it's October. It's breast awareness, breast cancer awareness month. And I think, all of us affected in one way or the other because we all come from mothers. Yeah. So basically, to start with, I'll start by talking about the technology itself. My topic, as alluded to, is establishing a line of sight on your critical, risk operations. To as simple as reasonably acceptable. If we can't take away anything at the end of this conference, at least we should be able to remember this acronym, ASARA. And to my Belgian friend there, ASARA is actually a Shona word, which means you've been left behind. So at the end of the conference, we're hoping that no one is going to be, on the ASARA side. But at the end of the day, what we are saying is technology must be able to work for you. It must not be difficult. It must be a simple application. So perhaps just to talk about some of the issues that I'm going to be talking about, I'll start with real-life risk management stories, picking up on a book by Julian Talbot, who is actually one of the international risk management, in fact, security risk management authors, who's got the book on real-life risk management. For a lot of us who were in the trenches way back when, safety started, I think you will remember that issues around the Deep Horizon accident, Piper Alpha, and all sorts of these major accidents, they are actually captured in that book in a very simplistic manner. And calling upon all delegates, to be able to get hold of that book. It's available online on Amazon. And there are actually some free downloads as well of that book, which I really urge delegates to look at. I'll also look at critical risk management as well as barrier analysis, linking it up with Risk Runner, the application. I'll also talk about your ISO 31000, particularly focusing on the monitoring and measurement aspects. And as I always say, there's a comedian in America called Rodney Dangerfield, who always says as a tagline, as he's talking, he says, "I never get respect. I never get respect." And, you know, the monitoring and measurement side of the business is the one that doesn't get respect as it relates to risk management. You'll find that we do all the other processes, but the monitoring and the measurement side of the business is kind of left out. I'll also talk about your critical control management processes, as well as the barriers. I think that's also a key area that I'm keenly interested in. And as we interact in this workshop, I think there will be some questions that I'll be asking delegates to interact as it relates to your own barriers or your own controls or critical controls within your organizations. And then, obviously, I'll talk about the value proposition in terms of saying, you know, how is Risk Runner going to help you in the dynamic risk management processes. So, just as a way of introduction, I did allude to the book, you know, written by Julian Talbot that I'll be talking about. The book basically, you know, is outlining. It's called Tales from the Edge, Real-Life Risk Management Stories. It's a storybook. It's something that I urge all delegates to read. And like I said, the key takeaway from that book is Julian Talbot talks about, you know, 1955, and he looks at, you know, the Fortune 500 countries, Fortune 500 companies, sorry, that were on that list in 1955, and then fast forward to 2023, only 10% of those companies were still on that list, and he poses the question, you know, whether this is actually attributed to good risk management, or it's really more of Schumpeterian creative destruction, which is basically, you know, your entropy that then results in, you know, those companies that have the survival tactics that then, you know, tend to survive. But what we then find is that in terms of risk does not choose winners or losers. Risk is basically neutral, which is why I think even the international standards now have, you know, alluded now to the fact that, you know, risk can be positive or can be negative. And what is actually important, which is basically the theme of this conference, is that we need to be able to innovate. We need to be able to adapt to the ever-changing, you know, markets. And using the tagline that I am talking about, to as simple as reasonably practicable, or to as simple as reasonably acceptable, which is the ASARA. And your ASARA is actually your new ALAP, as low as reasonably practicable, which a lot of you know, risk managers use in terms of managing their risk. So we are saying, yes, you need to manage it to as low as reasonably practicable, but you need to be able to manage it to as simple as reasonably acceptable as well. I'll also touch base on the risk management continuum, where I think this is a familiar environment for a lot of you know, SHE managers, a lot of occupational health practitioners, where in the organization, when things are going okay, no one recognizes that, you know, there's a SHE manager in the organization. We totally forget that there's somebody who's managing, you know, our risk. But whenever there's a problem, that's when it's really attributed to poor risk, poor risk management. And it's one of the failures in organizations that, you know, people fail to manage risk. It's not a SHE issue. It's not an occupational issue. It's actually a management of risk. It's basically managing the business. There's a number of questions that I want to pose at this stage to delegates, perhaps just to find out, in terms of your barriers, how many barriers do we have, you know, in our organizations? 10? Those who have 10 barriers, or more than 10 barriers? Maybe by show of hands. Your critical controls in your companies. If we can have a show of hands, how many have got more than 10, you know, critical controls within their organization? It's a Monday morning, I know, but we need to interact. I see a gentleman there, more than 10. Okay, 5. 5 critical controls. Yeah, it's a bad Monday morning. Anyway, so in terms of our barriers, we need to know how many barriers we've got in our company. And we also need to know how critical are those barriers. When was the last time that we actually checked those barriers for integrity to find out, whether these barriers are actually working? That chart that you see there, I think, is the most familiar chart in most organizations. Any, audit that gets to happen, you get to look at that risk register in Excel. And as I say there on the bottom there, I call it death by Excel, where I'm saying the management of risk should not, sit solely in the Excel spreadsheet, because it results in that, which I'm calling death by Excel, where once the risks have been identified, the controls have also been identified, that risk register is filed away somewhere, file 13. No one to look at it until the auditors are coming. Then you start running, looking for your risk registers, looking at your controls, looking at the action plans that you had committed yourselves to. So that's the challenge with Excel. We are not saying it's wrong to have Excel, but you need to also move with the times, move with technology. So this is where a risk runner also then takes center stage. So what we're saying is that risk assessments are dynamic. They should actually inform continual improvement. And as I alluded to earlier on, if you look at your ISO 31001 standard in terms of your risk management, the center of that chart, where you're talking of your identification of risks, your analysis of risks, evaluation and all those things, it's very well done. That part of the business. But when it comes to now the communication and consultation, which is on the left there, and then your monitoring and evaluation, which is on the right, those two facets of the risk management typology are normally left out. They normally are quite ignored. And this is where, you get this Rodney Dangerfield effect that I alluded to earlier, where, monitoring and review does not get respect. But as you can see, what needs to actually happen is we need to have a cyclical process where we're monitoring and reviewing our processes, and we're communicating and consulting with our stakeholders and our workers whenever we're interacting with and managing risk. What you see there is like a bicycle model of managing, risk, which actually brings out continuous improvement. On the one side is the maintenance side of your risks, and on the other side is the change management. So what actually happens is, because of your internal and your external drivers that are informing your risk, you then come up with your change requirement in terms of, what is it that you want to do. You design that change, you implement the change, and then you actually then verify whether those changes are working. And of particular focus there is your barriers, your controls, because your controls are your proxies to your management of risk. It's your best foot forward in terms of being able to manage your risk. And then there I'm just basically talking about Rodney Dangerfield, the comedian, and his tagline that he doesn't get respect, which is basically what we see as it relates to monitoring and measurement. And it's not every risk that has to go through your bow tie analysis or a deep dive in terms of analyzing, what are the issues. It's only your critical operations or your critical risks that should go through your, critical control management processes. And from an understanding perspective, you will find that, critical control management is one of those aspects that is, not very well understood. A lot of people think that, if you've got a whole list of generic controls, that is actually critical control. Others think that, when you've got your visible felt leadership programs, your leaders walking through the shop floors and everything. That is, critical control. Others even default to your maintenance program, where they think that, the maintenance program is, is part of, is actually critical control management. And I pose the question there to the delegates that, what are some of the misconceptions that you find in your organization, as it relates to critical control management? I think there's a lot of them out there. And then I also quote Dr. Sean Brady, when he actually said that most organizations, they often think that they're actually managing risk, when in fact they are managing paperwork. And we've seen this in a lot of organizations, where people, take comfort in having huge emergency, files. And, from my former life as an emergency manager, when the fan hits the roof, you need to respond, you need to act. So you might actually find that the simpler, the plans that you have, the more actionable they are. But you find that a lot of us believe in having huge, documents, and that sort of gives us a false sense of security in terms of, the controls that we actually have. And in terms of your critical control management, there's 3 aspects that, your control must meet. One is detect. It must be able to say that there's a problem here. It must be able to decide. In other words, it must be able to inform a decision in terms of managing, the hazard or the danger that is being posed. And then it must also then inform action. It must be able to deliver, on the mitigation or on the control that that you have there. I'll touch a bit now on the risk runner, which is the actual technology, and the value landscape as it relates to the technology. Risk runner itself, the focus really is on barrier performance. And what is there is you need to actually set your own, performance criteria to say what is it that you expect in terms of the deployment of a specific control. And it also encourages you to act before, something bad happens. I don't know whether there's a Dr. Mazodza in the house, but he used to have this famous saying that, she is the only profession where you are paid so that nothing happens. And it's actually one of the reasons why I then retired from she. Because, you are measured by, when nothing happens, you're doing, you're actually doing very well. But we are saying we need to turn that around and, monitor, the leading indicators as opposed to waiting for an accident to happen for us to be able to have the comfort that, our controls are in place. Okay. And then in terms of, the actual risk runner itself, the technology, it facilitates what we call a progressive risk management or dynamic risk management, where unlike traditional systems where you've got, your Excel spreadsheet and then you've got other risk assessments sitting somewhere, with Risk Runner, everything is in one application, so to speak. So it becomes much, much easier for you to be able to manage your risks. So you've got your basic hazard or your basic hazard identification and risk assessment, and then you've got your bow tie analysis for your critical, critical controls and your critical risks. You've also got your action tracking as well as your review planning, which I think we'll talk about in the next slides as well. And what are some of the benefits of Risk Runner? Obviously, the first one is that it provides systematic feedback on your essential controls. Also helps you save on time, because what happens is if you've got multiple sites, whatever updates that you put in one site, you can actually send them to the other sites, and then they can review them, adopt them as required, or modify them if they need to. And it also helps to simplify the risk management process, and thereby managing, your decision-making processes. And as we always say, it's not every risk that needs to go through a deep dive, you need to identify which ones are critical that you need to, that make a business case that you need to do a deep dive on to be able to then have your critical risk controls. In terms of the actual application, when you look at it from an architecture perspective, at the back end, it's basically an API. So it's web-based. You can actually access it on the web, anywhere on your phone or whatever. On the front end, you've got your risk assessments. On the one end, you've also got your input into your reports. And then you've also got some other, you can also plug in other tools, your SAP, your Excels, and everything else can also come in as plugins onto your risk runner. I'll also talk about the progressive risk model in brief. Basically, the progressive risk model comes in three levels or three katinas. Where level 1 is basically talking about, your normal Excel risk management. Level 2 is now looking at your bow tie, which is the diagram that you see there where you're looking at your consequences and your controls and your threats and the barriers and how you manage them. And I think that diagram is basically just summarizing the same. And then that loop I've already talked about in terms of, your continual improvement in terms of your management of your barriers. Your barrier components, simple like your seat belt that you use, that everyone has used as they came to the conference. They could either be physical or non-physical. I think the hierarchy of controls we all know, so I'll pass that one and go to the next one. I think your barrier functions I've also talked about. One can either be prevention or the other one can also be mitigation. And the same there, I think it's basically highlighting the same issue in terms of your functions, of your barriers. That one shows your guardrails as well as your airbags, which is 2 types of barriers that you have in a crash incident. Then how to actually manage to do your progressive risk management. Firstly, you identify your processes. You then go on to your hazards, and then you build your bow ties. You identify your critical controls, and then you do your data analytics, and then you come up with your decision making. And for me, I think that is really ASARA. In other words, it's as simple as reasonably possible. I will pause on that note at this end due to time limitations, and perhaps leave it to our lead for this part of the conference to lead us into the next processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charles, for giving us insights into the new technology, the risk runner, building upon the traditional approach in terms of your HIRA, hazard identification and risk assessment, but indeed giving us an opportunity to adapt and to begin to live within the scope of ASARA. Maybe at this point in time, I want you to hold on to your questions as my 3 presenters come through, and then we have a discussion at the end of the 3 presenters. We have enough time for them. Please just make sure you hold on to your questions. Now, my second presenter is Madame Nozifo Masichke. Is currently the Certification Services Manager with the Standards Association of Zimbabwe. She has been with the Standards Association of Zimbabwe for the past 10 years, responsible for the maintenance of various accreditations for management systems. The SARS certification systems is currently accredited to ISO 9000, 14000, ISO 22000, as well as 45,000, including the HACCPs. She has, with 16 years experience in quality assurance in the food, medical devices, as well as veterinary environments. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our heads together as we allow Madame Nozifo who holds a degree in biology and biochemistry, as well as a master's in business leadership, to come through and take us through her presentation on virtual walk-throughs, conducting virtual safety and health inspections and audits. Again, another new technology. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. When I woke up this morning, in line with the previous presenter's topic in terms of risks, I was thinking, would I be able to wake up this morning considering what happened yesterday evening? I'm sure you know what happened yesterday evening. Something to do with the 2-1. Yes. But then, as I stand here today, let me confirm that I will never walk alone. Okay. All right. So I think today I'm not here to talk about anything new to any one of us. I think most of the things that I will talk to today is something that we've probably seen, but then we have not maybe aggregated it to make it one thing. And I'm going to be talking about virtual walkthroughs, conducting virtual safety and health inspections and audits. And as I'm going to be discussing this particular topic, I am going to borrow from a document that I've had the privilege of knowing about. That is an International Accreditation Forum mandatory document number 4. So I guess in terms of the objectives, by the end of this presentation, I hope that we will get an understanding of what virtual walkthroughs are for inspections. We'll also get to delve a little bit into the requirements of IAF MD4. Allow me to use acronyms. And then also we're going to explore some ICT tools for safety audits. And we're also going to look at some best practices in terms of this particular area of virtual walkthroughs. So what is IAF MD4? Like I said, International Accreditation Forum, mandatory document number 4. It's a document that we use as certification bodies in terms of ensuring that if we do virtual audits, for example, they are consistent, there's security when we're doing it, and it also gives credibility to that audit. I think my presentation would say that it is usually used by certification bodies and accreditation bodies. But then in line with what we do, I felt that we could also learn from this particular document as well in terms of the guidelines that are in place or requirements in place when you are carrying out a virtual audit or a virtual walkthrough. So, okay, so in terms of the requirements of IAF MD number 4, it sets out key requirements in terms of what it requires when you are carrying out a virtual audit. So it looks at the organization's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibilities as well. It also ensures that there is confidentiality and also a security when you are carrying out a virtual audit. It also requires that the risks that previous presenter was talking about be documented and an assessment be done in terms of carrying out that audit. So I think as well, the risk runner that he was talking about is something that we can also utilize in this particular aspect. And as you was highlighting, instead of the documentations that we usually have, and we find auditees running around to actually produce them during audits, those sometimes do not work, and he's very right. Having an application that assists you in that can actually make the process more vigorous and robust. And then it also requires that an organization also confirms ICT infrastructure readiness. I think you can agree that it would be a good thing to say that we want to do a virtual audit, but then are we ready for it? let us assess our internal capacity in terms of actually doing an ICT-based audit and check how ready we are, what do we have in place, and maybe we can use that in the meantime and improve as we move on. And then it also requires that you also specify what you need to do in terms of the audit. You define how far you want to use ICT within the audit, and you also must ensure that the auditors that are actually carrying out the audit have the competence to actually carry out the audit. You would want a situation where someone is auditing someone in another branch using Microsoft Teams, and then the video is something that you generally need, and then someone cannot switch it on. So I'm sure in that regard, that audit would not go on well. So you also need to assess that on both sides, how capable or how competent are they in using the ICT tools that you have chosen to carry out that audit. And then also in terms of the time taken, I'm sure there would be some differences when it's a physical audit being done and it's a virtual audit being done. You might also need to also take into account maybe adding more time for that particular audit to ensure that it's done efficiently and effectively. Because with ICT tools, sometimes they might not be as reliable as maybe having a person on ground. And then also as a review, it also requires that you do a review of how the process went, and your reports that you do also state what happened during that particular audit or the safety walkthrough that you were doing. Was there cut-off from in terms of connectivity? Was there someone who was not able to connect? Was there someone who was not able to use the platforms that we're using for that audit? That would now inform future audits that will be done. Okay, and then I'll just talk a bit about applying MD4 in safety inspections. Okay, in some instances, there can be a need for an agreement, a pre-audit agreement, to just say what ICT tools are we going to use, what is the scope, in issues to do with confidentiality, impartiality, what are we going to be doing? Maybe at times there's a need to sign something to just say this is as far as we will go. And probably when the auditor sees something that is outside the scope, then they will leave that particular area probably for the next audit, or maybe just highlight it as an area of improvement. So there's a need to define the scope, or else probably you get carried away with the audit itself. And then also, there's also the review of the site hazards virtually. And then also, there's also need to check ICT capability. I think I've a bit talked about this as well. Then there's also need to plan the walkthrough route. Which direction are we going to be taking? Without proper planning, I'm sure with any audit, even if it's an ICT one, it tends to run amok. So at the end of the day, you would need to actually plan which route you're going to be going through in terms of the walkthrough. We talked about training the auditors on ICT use. I think we've covered this. If there are any gaps in competencies that you have noted, there's also a need to look at to conduct the inspection itself, and then also record the evidence in terms of the audit that was done. And then I talked about documenting ICT also use in the report. Then I think let's talk about best practices. With IT tools, with internet, with network, basically there is a need to use secure, reliable platforms. And I think in this regard, there are actually some standards that an organization can leverage on in terms of checking these particular things. We have ISO 27001 in terms of information security. We have ISO 27032, which talks to internet security and those guidelines and requirements. So also leveraging and implementing those requirements can also help in terms of ensuring that do we have secure and reliable platforms, and not just rely on probably using Google or AI to say, is Teams secure, is Zoom secure? When you implement these particular standards or look at what these standards give you as guidelines, you can now actually check your own system to actually check, is Teams secure? Is Zoom secure? Is WhatsApp secure? So you can actually check that, leveraging on those particular standards. And then in terms of best practices, there's also a need to check connectivity before inspection. Maybe just as background, I know as Standards Association, during the COVID era, we still had to carry out our audits regardless of the fact that we could not be physically be found on site. So we had to come up with something in terms of checking things like that. We actually came up with a checklist to check all things that could go wrong. And then what mitigation measures do we have in place to actually combat that? Like, for example, if connectivity goes out, for example, you have a Wi-Fi connection, maybe there's a need to ensure that the auditor has a backup connection that they can use and quickly switch to that one so that they can carry out the audit. I think there's also need to create contingency plans. That was what I was talking about, backup video, audio. At times when we were conducting our even occupational health and safety audits, we also had to switch probably to our phones and use WhatsApp video to actually navigate our audits to ensure that the audits proceed. And then there's also a need to communicate clearly when the audit is being done. Some would leverage on some AI platforms to actually maybe go use voice to text speech to actually use it to actually gather audit evidence when probably someone is not being clearly heard, or even at times using WhatsApp. Someone sends a message on WhatsApp and says, this is what I'm saying. So in terms of virtual walkthroughs, it's not like you're doing something that is out of this world, but you are using what you have in terms of ICT tools to ensure that the audit is done, even in situations where it is not possible. Then I think one of the last items in terms of best practices is the hybrid approach. I'm sure you can understand that with some things, in as much as virtual works, there might be a need to be on site to just check. But then with the COVID, it was kind of difficult because you couldn't be on site. But then you can minimize probably the amount of time that you need to be at a certain area physically by using the virtual. You do more virtual, and then you do a bit of follow-up on your using when you can get there physically. And then in terms of the workflow, I think we have covered it a bit. This is basically what you need. These are the steps you need to take when you are actually carrying out the inspection. Bear in mind, this is the major ones. There might be some other areas you might need to add to the workflow. Agreement and objective setting, ICT risk and readiness check, audit planning, where you are including the ICT methods you want to use. You're doing a competence check for the people who are doing the audit. You actually do the work, the walkthrough itself. You capture your evidence. You write your report, ensuring that the effectiveness of the ICT tools you used are highlighted for the future. And then you can actually now maybe do a follow-up, which can be virtual or on-site. So I think my last slide is just the summary in terms of virtual walkthroughs, virtual inspections. They assist with efficiency, ensuring that something is done well, and also accessibility. We wouldn't want to stop an inspection being done because probably there is no money for someone to travel somewhere at the risk. I'm doing this at the risk of offending people who want their travel and subsistence. But then sometimes it is necessary for the virtual to be used to ensure that the work is done regardless of the fact that the situation does not allow. And then also using IAF MD4 as your basis ensures that the way you do your virtual walkthroughs is credible. And you can actually even quote it even in your procedures if you want to ensure that it shows that you are following certain steps in terms of doing your virtual walkthroughs. And then I think key elements that we should remember: security, security, security. I highlighted some ISO 27000 family of standards that can be utilized to actually guide what we do in terms of ensuring that there's security when we are doing the virtual walkthroughs. Competence, that is important. You wouldn't want to have a virtual walkthrough and not be able to achieve what it's supposed to achieve because someone is unable to use a certain ICT tool that has been availed to them for the audit. Planning. Planning is important because it ensures that you have all your ducks in a row before you actually carry out the virtual walkthrough. Then reporting. I think I highlighted this several times. It's important that we report on how it went so that we know what we can do in future if there were any hurdles that we faced. Then, is highlighted, I think, in my the previous slide, virtual is an enhancement, not always a replacement of on-site audits. When we can do on-site, let's do on-site. But then when we cannot do on-site, let us not forego the process of doing the virtual walkthrough safety inspection because we cannot be there. Virtual is there to assist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nozi, for that very precise presentation on virtual walkthrough, bringing home to the fact that it's possible to conduct an audit virtually, but emphasizing quite a lot in terms of navigating through the ICT platform and be in a position to understand how you can go through that. The last presenter for this particular session is our highly esteemed delegate all the way from Belgium, European Union, who is, pardon me if I don't pronounce his name well, it's Ganda Carthagen. Is a biologist at the Federal Public Services Employment, Labor and Social Dialogue, the Belgian Authority for Occupational Health. As a scientific expert, he monitors worker exposure to hazardous agents with a focus on biological and chemical risks. He represents Belgium in the European advisory bodies and contributes to national and international efforts to improve workplace safety and well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together as we allow Ganda to come and take us through the presentation on occupational safety and health practice in Belgium and insights on the European Union framework on OSH. Over to you, Ganda. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And let me say it's an honor to be here, to be invited here, to be able to speak to you at the Shaw Convention 25. And yes, if you can show me the presentation, I would like to begin. So my presentation is on occupational safety and health practices both in Belgium and in the EU. And I'm just going to paint a brief picture of that. So at first I'm going to have a short overview of the OSH principles in Belgium, then also the OSH framework in the European Union, and then I will want to be able to let you see how those two are integrated, because also Belgium is part of the EU, and there are different steps in the legislative procedure, and how they are integrated is an important part in how the laws and the regulations come into effect. And then I will touch upon something that is, I think, key of what I'm trying to convey, and that's the aspect of social dialogue. So workers and employers coming together, having the dialogue on how they can, in practice, but also, and I will let you see, how they can actually come together and work together on better rules, but also in practice how to protect workers in practice. And then at the last instance, I will also touch upon a brief OSH practices in Belgium that are specific for our country. So let me begin with a short overview of OSH in Belgium. So there are some key milestones. So in the 19th and until the mid-20th century, you had a more non-specific provisions. Those were mostly environmental aspects in per factory, and actually those were also a bit not only for worker protection, but also for protecting the neighbors, the well-off neighbors of those factories, that their neighborhood wouldn't smell so bad. So it was not, in those times, it was not only for worker protection. But then from the mid-20th century, we saw that there was really a developing in OSH regulation and also a codification, so putting all the rules together in one book. And then you also saw, and especially in 1989, the development of the European Union, but also of the European regulation, and especially the Framework Directive. I will talk of that also in a little bit. That actually is the main directive for occupational safety and health in the European Union. Then in '96 there was the first major law of well-being at work, where we defined safety and health not only as to keep workers safe at their jobs, but we defined it more broadly. There should be a well-being at work. So workers should not only be safe, but their mental and physical well-being should be uplifted at work also. And then in 2017, we made the effort of doing a new codification, and we put all the OSH rules in one book, and that's our code. So also a bit of a schematic overview of our regulation. At the left, you see our law of well-being at work. And actually that goes through our new Belgian OSH legislation, who is also sometimes inspired by the new European OSH legislation, and that comes then through the right of in our Code of Well-being at Work, and also some older regulation that we are trying to encapsulate in that book. And then you can go to the next slide, please. And so what is that book, the Code of Well-being at Work book? That's a book of, well, actually the code is our 10 books. And the first book are the general principles of what OSH means in Belgium, what kind of actors, OSH actors that there are, and which kind of responsibilities they have in the work floor. And you also have the importance of the social dialogue in Book 2. And then the different other books, they talk about different themes. So you can talk about how the workplaces have to be, how safe they have to be, how the work equipment, which norms they have to do too. And also you then have the specific agents that are talked about. So in Book 5 you have the physical agents. Book 6 you have the chemical agents. Those are also the carcinogens, mutagens, and reprotoxic agents. And also I think this is one thing that Belgium is one of the 4 runners now, I think, in the world, certainly in Europe, is that we also included now endocrine disrupting agents or endocrine disrupting chemicals in our chemical hazards regulations. So we also protect our workers against those EDCs, how we call it. And then a specific interest of mine, apart from the chemical hazards, are the biological agents. So I'm a biologist myself, and we're also trying to develop this biological agents, also influenced now by the new Convention of Biological Hazards that we have since this year. And also book 8 is about ergonomics, so also trying to protect workers against muscular and skeletal disorders. And book 9 is the protective and personal protective equipment. And we end in book 10 with work organization and specific categories. Those specific categories are mostly young workers and pregnant or breastfeeding workers. So to also explain a bit the framework in the EU. So the EU is a union of 27 member states. And it's I don't have to say, I think it's not easy for them to formulate similar regulation. So there are different levels and of negotiation and dialogue going on. And in the end, we have to come to a regulation that works for every member state. And to do that, we have a framework directive that actually regulates the key principles of OSH in the EU, and which then, there are then the sub-directives specific, for example, to pregnant workers or young workers, but also, like in the book, the Code of Wellbeing in Belgium also talks about carcinogens, biological agents at work, and other things. Thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. Now, the important aspect of this regulation is that it also comes from various kinds of negotiations and dialogue. And you have, at the European level, you have the European Commission, that's of the triangle, the top. The European Commission is sort of the government of the European Union, but then you also have on the left-hand side the European Parliament, where delegates from every country are seated in. But then you also have the Council of Europe, and those are mostly representatives of the different governments in the EU. So those are the ministers, Minister of Labour, of Work, but also in those negotiations where I take part in, I also represent the Belgian government in different council meetings. And it's, can we go back? Yeah, thanks you. And this, in the ordinary legislative procedure, those two, the European Parliament and the Council, are how we say it, co-legislators. So they have an input and they try to also come to an agreement and eventually new legislation. And also on the right-hand side, a thing that I really want to highlight here is the role of the social dialogue, because also on the European level, you have, for example, the Advisory Committee on Health and Safety at Work. And this is a tripartite body. So it's comprised of the Belgian, of the government representatives. So I'm the government representative of Belgium. But also you have representatives of employers and of workers. And those three parties then negotiate in their views how the new legislation which shape it has to be. And so that's poured into an advice, and that advice is then sent to the European Commission, who then actually can make new and better and also practical legislation. And now how these two, so you have on the one hand the Belgian procedure and on the other hand the European procedure, and how these are integrated is of great importance. So in the end of the European procedure you have and that you see in the middle, the Belgian input is via our Belgian members of parliament in the European Parliament, also the Ministry of Work, and also then the social dialogue body. And in the end, if there's a European new directive, we have to, and that's an obligation in the European Union, you have to transpose that directive into national legislation. And that can happen either through the government or parliament, where the Minister of Work and also the people in the Ministry of Work, like me, as an expert then, go into dialogue with the social partners, so the employers and the workers, and try to fit the directive onto the practical organization or the practical reality of Belgium. And in the end, we have mostly, that's a royal decree, and that's a sort of a national legislative act containing at least the minimum requirements set out in the European directive. So the European directive sets out the minimum requirements, but as a country we can go further. So that's something we can do also as a country. Now, like I said, there are different levels, and I think this is a key thing I want to emphasize of social dialogue. Because when we look at regulation, I think in a lot of areas, people say, yeah, that regulation is actually not so practical. And I think that social dialogue can really influence regulation in a way that it is practical, because these are moments that workers and employers can come together and talk about how regulation can really fit their sector or their working environment, and that is really a thing that they can use and is not something that it's hovering above their heads and just regulation that they have to apply to. So on the European level, like I said, so I am the Belgian representative of the government in the advisory committee on health and safety at work, and those gives advices to the European Commission. At the national level, we have the High Council on Prevention and Protection at Work, and also the National Working Council, and they also give advice in the transposition or in the development of new regulation at the initiative of Belgium in the area of work. But also on a lower level, at the sectoral level, for instance, the sector of the hospitals or the sector of metal workers, the sector of, for instance, the chemical industry. We also have committees that specifically also negotiate, and that's particularly between workers and employers, about how they can better equip their sectors on an OSH level. And then even on the company level, you have different committees where also the workers of that specific company go into negotiation or social dialogue with their employer. And also those workers are then, and the employer is then also advised by the prevention advisors of that company. And we see that those different levels of social dialogue actually have a positive effect on OSH and also on worker protection. Those different dialogues and those different levels are necessary for us to have working OSH practice. Then some examples of legislative initiative from Belgium. So, like I said, you have a lot of input from the European level, but we, of course, as a country, we can do our own thing. We can go further. We can think about other aspects that the European level has not thought about. And for example, like I mentioned earlier, in 2023, we were the first country in the EU to set a legislative initiative on endocrine disrupting chemicals. So those are chemical hazards that actually can influence the hormone balance in a human body, and can also influence the unborn child as well from the mother side as from the father side. And so is also not only something important for the workers themselves, but also for their children. And so we, with that legislative initiative, we set out that employers must apply the same stringent prevention measures to endocrine disrupting chemicals as to carcinogens, mutagens, and reprotoxic substances. So those are the most hazardous categories of chemical agents. And also, can you go back, please? And also, a bit earlier, also in '69, but also later on in the 2000s, we already set out to protect workers in Belgium against psychosocial risks, because we know, maybe that's a more specific situation in Belgium and other parts of the European Union, but we also know from scientific research that is, of course, a broader problem in the world, that we have a pandemic or an endemic of people with burnout or stress-related diseases. And we set out also already in the 90s and now in the 2000s to protect workers against those psychosocial risks. So also on this front, we were one of the forerunners in the European Union and I think in the world. And those are legislative initiatives of Belgium to protect our workers in a better way. One thing is, of course, to make legislation, but the other thing is to translate that legislation into something that prevention advisors, workers and employers can actually use in practice. So what we did and what we are continuously doing is developing, for instance, on the left-hand side you can see web pages. For instance, the new legislative initiatives on endocrine disrupting chemicals. This was very new, also in Europe, also in the world. So there wasn't much documentation for employers to go to work with. So what we did is we actually developed a whole set of web pages and tools to help employers to implement this legislation into their own company. Also, on the example of the psychosocial risks, we also developed even different websites to help workers to see how they are doing with different questionnaires, but also with different toolkits for employers to protect their workers at the company level. Also, translating those legislative initiatives into guidelines, we also set out now, we've just finished actually, with new web pages on and a brochure on biological agents and well-being at work, where we actually have web pages that discuss biological agents on 3 levels. So you have, like here on the screen, the different biological groups. So you have bacteria, viruses, prions, parasites, fungi. A virus can be airborne, can be transmitted by direct contact, but a parasite has a different way of entry and so has to be managed in a different way. So also the second way we divided that web page is on to actually help employers and prevention advisors in the companies on how they can actually stop the transmission, but also how they can actually control the different hazards in the working place. And I will ask the technical people to maybe show us the website now of the next slide. The next slide, please. Yeah. So and something that we also have, and that's actually not only in Belgium, but also EU-wise. Those are OIRAs. Those are online interactive risk assessment tools. And those are developed for everybody, every employer, also of big companies, but especially for small and medium-sized companies. Because we actually know from practice and experience, also our inspectorate also notices this when they have their inspections in those small and medium-sized companies, that they don't always have the experience or the competence to do a proper risk assessment. And so these tools, those are interactive tools on a web page, on a European web page, that they can do in different languages. Most of them are also in English, so if you're interested, you can also visit them and maybe draw some inspiration from them. That's also what we do, but because every country can develop their own OIRA, and then the European Union translates them to English or other languages. Is it possible then to click on the website, or? Just to let you see the website, so the EU OSHA website, that's the body in the EU, in the European Union, that actually develops a lot of guidelines, but also those OIRA, no, it's the OIRA website, please. So just to show the audience. So the next slide, and then next slide. Yeah, that's that one. So the EU website, the OIRA tools, and then you can scroll down a bit, and then you have a web page where you can search the different EU tools, the OIRA tools. For example, here is an OIRA tool on cleaning, but also on heat and cold. And if you start such an assessment, it takes to another web page, and then the employer can actually, or the prevention advisor can actually fill in that tool, and he gives you a feedback on the different practical measures, prevention measures that you have to take in order to protect your worker in your specific case. So those are very interactive tools, and also they're free to use. You just have to make a password, to make an account, and then everybody can use them, and they're also available in French, Spanish, and other languages. Yeah, thank you. Can you go back to the presentation, please? And another thing we did, the next presentation, next slide, please. Another thing we do in Belgium are our inspection campaigns. So those are done by our labor inspectorates of well-being at work. And they try to target specific sectors on their compliance with the regulation, workplace regulation on well-being at work. And the focus or the goal is not only to punish the employer who is not in order with their risk analysis, for example, but also to give advice on how to actually apply those regulations in a way that really protects workers. And for instance, we have done different campaigns. The one that you see here is for the service voucher companies. So those are services that people go to do in private homes. So cleaning or ironing or other things. And the focus on the inspection campaign a few years ago was on musculoskeletal diseases, chemical hazards, because the cleaning products that they use are very hazardous. Certainly for women who are breastfeeding, who are maybe pregnant. And also the psychosocial risks are very evident there, because the workforce there is feminine for I think 8 or 90%, and the harassment cases are very lively there. And what we saw there, that even the beginning is missing. So these inspection campaigns really lay out the things that are going wrong. For instance, the risk analysis was missing in 85% of those cases. So that's huge. Also, there was no health surveillance in 60% of the cases, and there was insufficient supervision at client's home. Also, that's also a risk for psychosocial diseases. And so the key takeaway of that campaign was that the need to have also the prevention services to raise the well-being obligation of the workers. And so we also did a different follow-up inspection campaigns. Another campaign that we did, and I think it was also mentioned that it will be maybe on Wednesday or tomorrow, is on the exposure of workers on crystalline silica dust. And when specific also focus on engineered stone processing. Engineered stone or composite stone are the things that we have in the kitchen. So the kitchen countertops, and where you start actually applying that or making that smaller, it generates a lot of dust, and that dust has a huge amount of silica in it, and so it's very dangerous and can actually cause silicosis in very young people. So we were talking about workers in their 20s, in their 30s, with an advanced form of silicosis. And so the inspection campaign did actually find also in 92% of the cases that there was no risk assessment, there were no dust measurements, there was no worker training, and the PPE was also poorly maintained. So there we also had now having not only the key takeaway is there that maybe we don't have to only inform the employer better or to have also other inspection campaigns, but also maybe we'll have to devise new legislation that is better equipped to actually that can take this specific hazard in another way, and actually can maybe be better. It was an honor to be here and to be presenting for you. And if you have any questions, I will be able to answer them in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gunter, for that elaborate insights into the Belgium occupational safety and health system, also touching on the EU in other parts of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to recognize the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, Mr. Simon Masanga, and other senior government officials. Also recognizing senior officials from the Public Service Commission. Indeed, we welcome you. Our social to recognize the NASA board, led by the board chairman, Mr. Christopher Dube. Thank you for being with us. And allow me also to gentlemen, the three esteemed speakers were speaking to the sub-theme, emerging technologies in safety and health management, and I'm sure they lived up to that particular sub-theme itself. Let me also remind delegates that if you want to access your program, it is on, and you can have an idea of what is going on, what are the proceedings. So just a reminder that the program, you find it on your very important subject to deal with establishing a line of sight, speaking to a technology to manage critical controls to a symbol as reasonably acceptable. Charles is from Tonga Hulet, Zimbabwe, from the Law Valley. Nozifo, who took us through virtual walkthroughs, conducting virtual safety and health inspections audit. And I'm sure we were made aware of the fact that it's possible to conduct virtual audits, virtual inspections. And then that presentation, those two presentations certainly led us to have an insight into the Belgium Occupational Safety and Health Framework. The presentation from our colleague from Belgium was speaking precisely also to the previous two speakers as far as emerging technologies are concerned. Charles, Nozifo, as well as Ganta, we are at that stage to interact with them to have a better insight into their presentations. So I'm very much glad to invite questions from you, esteemed delegates. I can start with this row. Questions, I can see a roving mic, please, at the corner there. Let's quickly move with our mic. At the corner there. At the corner there. Please, can we quickly move with speed? Another hand on this side. At the corner there. At the corner there. Please. If there is none, yes, can I have the question, please? Our mic, please, at the back there, the technical team, please.
Oh, maybe, yeah, it's okay now. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. My question is to Ganta. Thank you very much for the informative presentation. There's one particular area of interest, the well-being at work inspectorate, the breaches. I saw the high number of percentages where risk assessments are not done, and these are very, very key items when it comes to occupational health and safety. Did you do any investigations as to why it's like that? I remember you said there's legislation that will come to maybe to reinforce it more, but is there a reason why those numbers are so high? Any investigations that were done? Because even in our various workplaces, we suffer from that. No matter how much training we give the guys, somehow the risk assessments sometimes are not done. Maybe there's something which you found and which can be of assistance to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can take another second question. Our roving mics must move with speed. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think my first question is to do with social dialogue. Khan indicated that they have a program with social dialogue, but normally you have problems where
volume.
No, that's okay. No, it's okay. In Africa, normally the problem that we have where social dialogue has to take place, our employee groups normally are not technically up there in terms of appreciating and understanding issues that are technical. And for that reason, you find their contribution where in social dialogue sessions is not as good. Appreciated, these are technical issues. We are talking of biological hazards. We are talking of chemical hazards. And these are technical, areas of, that need technical appreciation. What has been done, or how is the Belgian government tackled the problem of getting employee groups to a position where they can contribute on issues that are technical at the same level with employers? I'm assuming they have the same problem that we have in Africa, in third world countries. It may not be so. If it's not so, then maybe we understand. But if it be the case, how have they been able to tackle the problem of bringing the participation of employee groups at the same level with employees where social dialogue is concerned? I think that's the first question. The second one, Ran indicated that the inspectorate does come in to advise, to give advice to employers or to industry in the over and above the role of inspecting or enforcing the law. Is there no a case of a conflicted situation here where then, where if the inspector provides advice and then it turns out that something goes wrong, the employer can then come back and accuse the inspector to say, look, things went wrong. I cannot stand prosecution because I was acting on advice from the inspector. Just a hypothetical case, just trying to understand how the situation works out in Belgium.
Okay. All right. Let me move to this aisle. Can you hold on to our question? We'll come back for the second round. This portion, yes, I can see a hand there. I'll encourage delegates, please. Thank you.
That we have stage 1 audits and stage 2 audits when you are going for certification.
Can you try to speak a bit louder, please?
Okay, my question is directed to NOSIPO on virtual audits. So I just want to understand the credibility of the audit findings when we are using virtual work. Understand that certification is all about checking effectiveness of the systems. So how do you check the systems when you're using the virtual platforms?
Okay. Another second question in this row. Yes, at the front here. I think we need to have 2 sets of moving. That one at the corner there.
Thank you, Gunther, for the presentation. My question is, could you just give us a brief overview on penalties attendant to non-compliance?
I hope the question has been heard about prions. Let me move to the last aisle. Any questions? Right. If none, at this point in time, allow me to ask Gunther to respond first, and then we move to Nozifo.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. To begin with the first question, as I understood it, why the high numbers of non-compliance, I think. So you saw in both inspection campaigns that there was a high for the, let's simplify the service voucher to the cleaning sector maybe, and then to the also the respirable crystalline silica dust Those were the two inspection campaigns, and we saw in both sectors that there was a huge problem with the first step of, I think, OSH, and that's the risk assessment, that they did not do it or not properly. And the reason why, for instance, is that there are, even with employers, and that's maybe also part of the answer on the second question, are not always they knowledgeable on the different hazards that their worker are exposed to. For example, a lot of cleaning workers in the cleaning sector actually the employers think that it's most of ergonomic problems, like they have back pain, they have elbow pain, they fall from heights. But the simple thing as that they are also exposed to chemicals, a lot of employers don't actually recognize that, or do not know it, or they do not recognize that. And if you don't recognize those hazards for your workers, then you don't do a risk assessment. And so that's a huge problem. So, and at the one level, of course you have to educate maybe workers, but also employers. And that's one of the jobs we also do within the Ministry of Work. At the crystalline silica sector, I think it's a bit of the same. So the specific danger with composite stone is that the silica levels are very high, sometimes 85%, and in normal stones that's far lower. That's sometimes 20–35% of silica in those stones. So when you start cutting them up, a huge amount of silica dust and then silica content dust actually is coming out, and the worker is exposed to an enormous amount of those particles, and actually causes then silicosis. Like I said, with workers only 20 years old, 20 years old, also already have silicosis. So that's unimaginably, it's a very, very dangerous working material. And so also there, I don't think that because those companies are also very small, that the employers are also not always, do not always know that those dangers are actually so high, and thus that those hazards are actually are coming into force in their workforce, and don't actually take the proper measures, but also don't do a proper risk analysis. And also those are very small companies, so, and that we know also from other inspection campaigns, that the smaller the company, the more problems that they have with making risk assessments. Then also the other question, as workers in social dialogue, with all due respect, I think that workers are experts. Also, we have, to answer another question that you said, the situation is a bit the same. I think as in Africa, we have workers who are not experts in chemical agents or in biological agents, but they are experts in the process that they do each day. They are experts. They know when something is going wrong. They know when something smells or there is something going wrong in their processes, because they know they do it every day. Also, when they have something, they're using a product and they see that their hands is always infected or their lungs are hurting. So they are the experts in the field, sometimes even more than the employer. So I think I contest the notion that workers are not experts, and I contest the notion that they cannot contribute, therefore, to social dialogue. I think they're an essential part in making good OSH legislation. because without the workers, you have to have the employers, but also the workers for good social dialogue. And that's the key part also, I think, that we do in Belgium and in the EU, is to get workers to share in that social dialogue. Well, and how we do that in a practical manner. So also in the chemical industry, also the employer is not an engineer or he's a CEO. He knows a lot of financing, but does not always know about the chemical processes or the chemical hazards that are there. And therefore we have a position, we have the prevention advisor, and he advises not only the employer, but also in the committees with the social dialogue, he also explains the dangers and the specific risks that are present in a factory to the workers. And on that level, he also has to explain the things in a good way to the workers, that they understand the risks and hazards that are there, and then they also can give their input. And that's why those committees are there, that workers can have their input, and so that OSH practices of those companies can actually be bettered. And our inspectorate, it's not that we use our inspectors to give personal advice to employers. Of course, they're government officials. They have their jobs. I only wanted to say that the thing that those inspectors do in an inspection campaign is not, employer, you're doing something wrong, now you get a penalty of $10,000. That's not what they do. So in the first step, they see what's going wrong, and they make a report with different shortcomings, but also with advice on how to address those shortcomings. That's what I wanted to say. So the inspectorate does not immediately penalize, but also goes into dialogue with the employer on how to better protect their workers. So that's what I wanted to say. It's not that they're a personal advisor or something. No, it's that they also help the employers on to actually better protect their workers. But I did not really understand the last question. Sorry. Could someone?
I think those were the 3 questions, I think, so far.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think Nozifo, you can respond. Volume, please. Technical team.
1, 2. I'm doing what the checker was doing in the morning.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
All right. Thank you for your question. I think you highlighted that stage 1 audit, which is the document evaluation audit. I guess it would be acceptable, since we're just checking documents, to do it off-site or virtually, so to speak, as in the auditor will be off-site, and then maybe will be connected with the person or the organization being audited virtually via a platform that you would have agreed on. Then in terms of the stage 2 audit, I think you asked about the credibility. Since the stage 2 audit, we are checking on implementation, that is what is actually being done on the ground in terms of the requirements of the standard that is being audited against. I think in my presentation I was talking about the International Accreditation Forum mandatory document number 4, which specifies that if you are to use ICT tools for any reason that you might see to do an audit, you're supposed to adhere to these requirements. So in terms of ensuring that, for example, if we do an audit at an organization, stage 2 virtually, we are supposed to prove to being an accredited certification body, we are supposed to prove to our accreditation body that we have implemented the requirements of that mandatory document. If we can sufficiently prove that, then we are basically saying that what we did at the stage 2 audit virtually is credible. However, let me just highlight that as a certification body ourselves, we have a policy that firstly, we will do an audit on site. But then if the situation does not allow, you'd find us mixing both virtual and on site. Virtual will probably be done for document reviews and just taking documentation generally in terms of implementation records and things like that. And then if we need to verify, then we probably split the time we need to do the audit. Half it's done off-site virtually, then half of it is done on-site, where we are just basically checking what we would have noted probably in the documents and even in the conversation we would have had with the auditee whilst we're doing it virtually. But then bottom line is, if we implement International Accreditation Forum MD document number 4, the audit would have done. If it's deemed we followed the requirements of that document, then it is credible.
Thank you, Nozifo. I will allow Ganta to answer the other question on penalties.
Yeah, thank you. So the question was, what kind of levels are there in penalties? Yeah, that the penalties depend on how grave the mistake or the fault was by the employer. So we have different levels, but I don't know by heart which kind of how much that corresponds to in money. But the first thing that, like I said with the inspection campaigns, what the inspectorates do, is that they give a warning. And then so they give the employer a chance to resolve the problems. And then if at the second visit they are not compliant or they still show the same breaches of the regulation, they can get a financial fine. And so those fines are I think in 4 different levels, and the bigger, so I think in 3 or 4 it's like different thousands of euros, but the exact numbers I cannot say. And another thing that our inspectors can do is to shut down the process immediately. So they can shut down, if that's a specific process in a chemical plant, they can shut down that process, or they can shut down the entire plant. So those are the variations of things that an inspector can do in Belgium. So from a warning to financial fines to really stopping the process or the factory.
Okay, thank you so much. Ganta, I can take the second round briefly. I'll start with this side. This side, okay, one here. Please, quickly. A roving mic here. Okay. Right, just be precise in the interest of time so that many people can ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My question is on the Risk Runner software in terms of requirements for implementation and licensing that can be required for that, and also how if its ability to piggyback on existing systems already implemented. Thanks.
Thank you. Licensing issues on the Risk Runner. Second row. Yes, I can see a hand there.
Thank you. It's an addition on the Risk Runner. My question there is why the Risk Runner application? We have seen quite a number of applications for software, like your RSQ, Acura, etc. Why Risk Runner? Is it easily affordable? Can it be used by a shop floor employee? Are we able to sort of get inputs or outputs that can assist the shop floor employee?
Thank you. The last question in any row. Where? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. My question is to Ganta from Belgium. You spoke about the issues on exposure on workers working on dust and silica. And I want to assume that in your dimensions there, it's mostly happening, the operations are done underground. But here, we are having both underground operations and surface operations. And from the way you were saying you should check on the data on the website, it's more to deal with preserving the workers, the humans. But I would want you then to shed light on situations where there is danger to human life, workers, and also danger to ecological setup. Because here, it's now a disaster, which is more affecting ecological setup and other earthly human inhabitants. If you could take us through how you have undergone such disasters.
Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, our presenters, to respond to those two questions, starting with Charles.
All right, thank you very much for the question. I think in terms of the requirements for, logging on to Risk Runner, if you just go on your web browser and you Google riskrunner.app, you will be able to, once you go there, you log in as in like you're requesting to have your credentials accredited, goes through perhaps your Gmail, and then the Risk Runner team will actually then respond to your application, and they can actually give you a trial version, which you will then be able to try over a period of time. It's actually developed in Netherlands. So the team that actually does that is in Netherlands as well as in the UK. They are the developers of the application. So if you just go to riskrunner.app, and then you put in your login credentials there, your email and everything else, they will definitely respond to you, and they will be able to assist you with regards to how you can now start playing around with the application. And then in terms of why Risk Runner, which is a very, very good question, I think one of the reasons for Risk Runner is that the developments that they've tried to address, I'll give you a few of them, like one or two. One of the key issues, which I highlighted earlier on, is the issue of, either oversimplification or, overcomplication of your risk assessment process. You'll find that with risk management, your risks are different. They are not the same. So the attention that you require to the risk depends on the level of risk. So a lot of the applications that we use tend to have, a single approach, single tool approach, to the problem, where you'll find that maybe for a very complicated problem and for a very simple one, they want to proffer an Excel spreadsheet, for example. Whereas with the Risk Runner, it takes cognizance of the fact that for a much, much simple risk, you may need to just look at the risk, look at the controls. You don't have to, exercise on the problem. So that's one of the key advantages of Risk Runner, that, it recognizes that. And in doing that, what Risk Runner actually does is it proffers the progressive risk management model, which I wanted to talk about in detail earlier on, where for the level 1 risk assessment sequences, depending on the level of risk. And then you go on to the full bow tie program, which is now looking at your cuts are within all in one platform. The application are taking on board the issues that the user platform is raising. So that also then helps in that it's a dynamic platform. Thank you very much.
Yes, Gata, please. Thank you so much for that response.
Thank you for the question. Health, that's sometimes very difficult, but maybe let me explain our Belgian experience with 2 examples. The first one is about PFAS. I don't know if in the audience anyone has heard about PFAS or the forever chemicals. So those are fluorinated carbon atoms, and so they form chemical structures that are actually very tough and very tough to destroy, and they were developed by DuPont and 3M, and they are used in specific, well, in various things because they're very hard to destroy. So in aerospace, in also in medical profession, in medical sector, and so on. But they were developed in the mid of the past century, and they now pose a very big problem in Europe, because now almost every soil in Europe and in Belgium is polluted by this chemical, because for long they didn't recognize the danger that it poses, because it also poses a lot of dangers for human and environmental health, because it can actually affect, because it stays a long time in the body of humans but also animals, and can alter the endocrine system. So it's also an endocrine disrupting chemical. And what we do now is actually, because you have an environmental disaster, but you also have a human health disaster that's going on. And what we do is actually go and work together with, like, for instance, different governmental agencies, so we are more like the human health side, but we also work together with the environmental agencies and the environmental governmental groups in how to tackle that. Because I think if you're looking at it at the human health side or at the environmental health side, the first thing you want to do is that the production of those chemicals have to stop, or to be lowered as much as possible, so that the pollution is not going on anymore, and then how to remediate the pollution that has been there. And with those with collaborations, I think you can achieve the goal, on the one hand the human health, and on the other one the environmental health, and that we can better both at the same time. So that there does not have to be contradiction, but you have to, the thing is that your process does not have to be fragmented. The same, I would say, is for another issue that we have in Belgium, is when we talk about GMOs, so genetically modified organisms. That's mostly environmental law and environmental regulation. But if you only look at it from an environmental view, then you're losing track also, because GMOs are also developed in a lab, where also people, workers are working, and also that can have a bad effect on human health. So what I am doing there in Belgium is, for example, say to my colleagues, governmental colleagues and academics, is that we don't, it's important to look at it for the environmental way of things, so that the GMOs don't escape and don't don't crossbreed with our wild nature, and so actually pollute the genetic diversity that's there. But also when developing such a GMO, or when, for instance, working with pathogens in a lab, that we also have to look at the human health side, so the working health, the occupational safety and health side. So that, and that's sometimes a hard thing to do, because people who only work in regulation about environment only think about it in that way. And so what I'm trying to do is every time, every meeting, trying to say, not only look at it at the environmental way, but also look at the workers, look at those who are exposed daily to those hazards. So I think one key thing I want to say there is don't look at it as a fragmented way, but let the environmental side and the human health side collaborate. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ganta and Charles, for those responses for this particular segment. But ladies and gentlemen, we want to give another round of applause to our presenters for this very insightful session, a job well done. We were speaking to emerging technologies in safety and health management, and as you can see, the topics by our presenters really indeed speak to that. You are going to see your program. I'm repeating again on your name tag. Some people may be looking, where is the program? Where is the program? The program is on your name tag. You just need to scan that QR code, and then you can access the full program. The password for Wi-Fi connectivity, our technical team, please ensure that it is beamed so that our delegates can be able to enjoy the internet connectivity. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we're just breaking briefly for our tea. We need to come back at exactly 11 o'clock. There is a very exciting showcase in terms of a symposia. Don't miss that. Don't go anywhere. Just keep yourself close by, because this is going to be an exciting session. Allow me, Dr. Shingi, to take our VIPs for a tea break. While we still remain seated, just briefly, our VIPs, please, you can take leave for tea, as the rest of us will follow. Thank you very much for this particular session.